Hey guys, my name is Adam and I'm here with a Shogun 2 Total War multiplayer battle replay. As you can see, this is a 2v2 matchup on the map Forest Gully, and this has to be one of the closest games on Shogun 2 I have ever played. You guys saw a replay of Empire Total War from me a little ways back, and I figured that I would showcase this matchup as well, because quite frankly, this is probably one of the best matchups I've had ever on Shogun 2, I'd say. And Gamer James probably would agree with me. So I'll put a link to Gamer James's channel in the description of this video. But as for right now, when it loads up here, I'm going to talk about army builds, and then we'll get right into the action. This was really close, as I said before, and it really came down to the wire right at the end. We also have key buildings on this map, which they definitely tip the battle in favor of one team or the other. So we'll definitely take a look at that. So first a look at the key buildings. We have a farmhouse over on my side. You'll see that we also have a shrine and a sword dojo. Now clearly the sword dojo is going to be meant for James's opponent here, who is named Dragon Racer, and he's going to rush for that. Alright, so taking a look at my army build, you'll notice that I have a core set of Nodachi Samurai. You'll see that I have 4 sets of these guys, and they make up the bulk of my infantry. They're highly vetted and extremely dangerous on the charge. As you can see in the bottom right, I upgraded these guys to have 40 charge bonus, and I also improved their melee defense to help them stand out a little bit better in extended melee. I have 1 set of bow warrior monks, and these guys have extended range, so I'm definitely going to be able to shoot many men down from quite a range, so that's very nice. I have 2 sets of Yari Ashigaru, and they are both 9 chevrons each. They're highly ranked. I mean, I love my Yari Ashigaru. They are absolutely amazing. I have 2 sets of Katana Cavalry and 3 sets of Yari Cavalry. Taking a look at Gamer James's build, you'll notice that he has a core infantry component of Naginata Warrior Monks, which is an interesting choice. For as long as I've played Shogun with James, he definitely tends to like number builds. So you'll notice that he has a line that stretches very far across the map, which is, generally a pretty good idea. I actually quite like that strategy. He also has 2 sets of warrior nuns, and they're spread out on each wing. He has his general's bodyguard, a couple sets of Yari Ashigaru, a set of long Yari Ashigaru. His cav component is 2 sets of Yari cavalry. Now, in regards to my army, you'll notice that I definitely went with a cav advantage. I felt that if I could get the cav advantage, I could roll up my opponent's army, which may have worked against a standard build, but my opponent will have something very peculiar. Let's put it in pause here, and I'll show you. You'll notice that my opponent here, who is with the pink banner, you'll notice that he went with, for the most part, he went with cavalry and ranged units. Not too many sword units. I believe he has 2. Yeah, he has 2 sets of Katana Samurai, and they're not even that good. 2 sets of Matchlock Ashigaru, 4 sets of bows. He has a couple sets of spears, and then the rest is all cavalry. Now, I will grant that none of his cavalry, or pretty much any of his units, are veterans. They still have a great numbers advantage over my 5 sets of cavalry coming down the hill. You'll also notice that his general's bodyguard is right here. And then taking a look at Dragon Racer's army, you'll notice that he has a couple sets of Matchlock Ashigaru, but the core of his infantry is Naginata Samurai. He also has a couple sets of highly vetted Katana Samurai as well. And that looks like it's about it. His cavalry force consists of 3 sets of Naginata Warrior Monk Cavalry, and they are highly vetted. Very dangerous cavalry. Very, very dangerous. His general's bodyguard is also over on his right wing. Alright, with that completed, we can go ahead and put it in play. So you'll immediately notice that I am rushing up on this hill, so I can hopefully get a little bit of a hill advantage. I noticed that his army is mainly comprised of bows and cavalry, so I see a huge opportunity here, and I'm eager to take it. Now, with only a couple spears to defend, I notice that his cavalry does have their backs turned, so I'm going to go ahead and just do a huge charge on him. He's going to try to turn around, but my charge bonus is going to be so much greater than his that it's really going to outweigh all risk here. Also, you'll notice that his Katana Samurai unit over here is isolated, and I have 2 sets of Katana Cavalry moving around. I'm going to charge one of them into this blob of melee to help out, but the other one I'm going to swing around and charge over here, and I'll let you get a little close-up of the action. At this point, I am going to start retreating, though, just so I don't take too many casualties. This was actually a tip by Gamer James because mainly I wanted to keep a cavalry force alive because it was one of my main components of my army. I have done a ton of damage to all of his cavalry though, which is always helpful. You'll also notice that I made him, at least Dragon Racer, swing 2 sets of cavalry of his own over to support his ally. So we're making our opponents kind of shift their armies around, which is always important. And here I'm going to go ahead and suicide 1 Katana Cavalry straight into his general. He's going to try to get away, but the problem is he's getting caught up. And I'm just going to start cutting him down. Now, a Dragon Racer is going to rush his Naginata Warrior Monk Cavalry into support as quickly as possible. And also, King Noob is going to rush his Yari Cavalry that he has left in as well. So unfortunately, I'm unable to kill the general. As you can see, he just kind of scooted out of the way a little bit. But I have done so much damage to his cavalry presence and his general that I felt that that charge was definitely worth it. You'll also notice that I do have a lot of cavalry remaining, and I am going to recharge in here because his back is once again turned. So at this point, I'm just trying to out-micro my opponent, which actually worked out pretty darn well. I will freely grant that I am not the best with micromanagement, but in this battle, it was I was pretty on top of my units. I'd say that I did a pretty good job of managing all fields of the battle. Alright, so over here you'll notice that Dragon Racer is taking a couple shots at James's Naginata Warrior Monks with his general, which is a pretty smart idea, and the main reason for that is because Naginata Warrior Monks have very, very weak armor. James is going to respond, though, by moving his bows around a little bit, hoping that he can kind of trap the enemy general into a false sense of security. Over here, Dragon Racer is going to charge one of his Naginata Warrior Monk Cav at my bows, and I'm just going to respond by moving my Yari Eshgar forward and moving my bows backward. He's going to retreat, but my bow warrior monks are going to turn around and start opening fire. And I'm actually going to do some sufficient damage. Because my warrior monks are so highly ranked, I'm going to actually cut down quite a lot of these just because of my great accuracy. So yeah, I did some pretty sufficient damage with that. Over here, you'll notice that James charged his sword attendants right at the enemy line. Not too advisable, but again, sword attendants are extremely expendable. They're, you know, it doesn't really matter if you lose them like that. Alright, I'm moving my bow warrior monks forward again, and I see a nice juicy target. As you can see, he has not moved his general far enough back. I'm going to go ahead and roll up with my bow warrior monks, and I'm going to start opening fire on his general, and I'm going to absolutely destroy the rest of this unit. So this will cause the general to rout from the field. However, I do not kill him, but it doesn't really matter because the general is no longer here to give morale support. Meanwhile, Dragon Racer is rushing a Naginata Warrior Monk Cavalry around my flank, hoping that he can out-micro me, which is not a horrible idea. Over here, you can see that Dragon Racer had not realized that James moved up his bows. He's going to start showering him with some fire arrows, which was a great move. Also, you'll notice that King Noob moved up his bow Ashigar to start taking shots at James's Naginata Warrior Monks and other units. However, I am now peppering them with my bow warrior monks. I also launched whistling arrows, which is greatly affecting the morale. As you can see, all units with those symbols next to their banners have greatly reduced morale, and they're just kind of suffering in general. Now, he did move one unit to start returning fire, but it's not going to do nearly enough. Alright. Over here, Dragon Racer is returning fire with James's bows. He's also taking some shots at the warrior monks here, which is very clever. Again, warrior monks have very weak armor, so any bow fire you can direct at them, especially when your opponent has Naginata warrior monks as their bulk of their infantry, I'd say that's a very wise idea, especially if you feel you're outclassed in the infantry department. Over here, King Noob's going to do a bonsai charge of his cavalry. At least he's initially was going to do that, but I run my bows backward and I'm running my spears forward. They're constantly keeping me micromanaging just through moving my Yari Ashigar forward and backward. Over here, I decide to engage his Naginata Warrior Monk Cav, but the problem being my Yari cavalry units were so depleted that they really can't stand up to this. On the charge, though, I did get quite a few kills. As you can see, this Naginata Warrior Monk Cav is down to 34. And I am going to be rushing in my Yari Ashigar to try to get a couple of kills on him. I'm not going to get a ton, but any amount that I can get is pretty nice. Over here, Dragon Racer did get a cheap little shot with his Matchlock Ashigaru on my Yari Ashigaru. Over here, James's sword attendants are charging into the bows, which is a very clever move. They actually came down from the tree line there, and they are going to hit the bows a little bit, this is actually a really, really good move by James here. Now Dragon Racer is going to respond by moving some units in to intercept. However, this is a Matchlock Ashigaru unit, so James is actually going to get some nice damage on all of the opponent missile units. So, seeing the situation, I decided to fall back just a little bit, reposition myself. As you can see, I'm kind of in a little state of chaos. I'm just trying to reposition in a way that would be beneficial for everyone here. And at this point, James decides to launch an all-out attack. And I decide that I'm going to follow up by moving my troops over this direction. Because as you can see, King Noob is trying to completely outflank. And I'll show you a little close-up of the action here. Here, his Naginata warrior monks are just charging straight into all these enemies. Now remember, these Katana Samurai are very dangerous, especially with the high ranks. Alright. So at this point, I am charging all my units around. I'm trying to keep his cavalry off of our rears by using my spears to my advantage. Unfortunately, right here, you're going to see that he's going to sneak some Yari cavalry around, which was pretty surprising they actually managed to do this. We definitely had a pretty narrow gap for them to get through, but they did manage it, and now they're going to go for a hammer and anvil strike. Very, very clever move, and this is going to cause some routing along the line. Meanwhile, I'm going to have my Nodachi Samurai coming in here very quickly. Also, you'll notice that I have one of my Yari Ashigaru and one of my Nodachi Samurai fighting over here against this set of Katana Samurai. Meanwhile, there's also a Naginata Samurai rushing into melee. I also have my bow warrior monks taking some shots into the flanks of these units. Currently, I'm taking aim at this Matchlock Ashigaru because Matchlock greatly will affect the morale of units. Over on James's front, you can see that I am now charging in my Nodachi Samurai, and I'm activating Banzai on the charge, so I get the maximum possible effect. As you can see, I just activated it right there. Alright. Also over here, you can see that my Yari Ashigaru have finally arrived, and they're doing quite a lot of damage. Up on this hill, you'll also notice that James has positioned his Matchlock Ashigaru to do a lot of damage, and also he has charged his cavalry over here, and he is eliminating the enemy cavalry, so props to him for that as well. So essentially this fight has turned into one huge blob match, and typically I'm not a huge fan of those, because I tend to bring highly vetted armies that are good with one-on-one engagements, but when you have units all blob together, things can get a little bit interesting, especially since they can start out flanking. And I'm really trying to hold the wing over here because if this collapses, then all these units can come pouring in around, and that will just break morale of everyone. I've also put my general into stand and fight. This will hopefully keep my Nodachi Samurai fighting. They are having a hell of a time, though, because these Katana Samurai are very, very good in sustained melee, and they're really highly vetted. So it's very dangerous. Also, their general is outflanking, and he's also popped an Inspire on this Katana Samurai as well. At this point, James decides to charge his bandits into melee, and they're just a bow unit. This was mainly a stalling maneuver, which was a decent idea, honestly, and Naginata warrior monks are trying to retreat here, but those bandits are trying to keep them at bay. Alright. Now, things are looking slightly grim. You can see that our opponents do have a lot of units, but do remember that their morale is shaky because they're not vetted at all. Over here, James's Matchlock Ashigaru is trying to get as many shots as they can in. Unfortunately, the general is doing a lot of damage with charging. Also, he has this bow warrior monk here who is showering down fire arrows. So far, so good. Unfortunately, over on this wing, it looks like we're starting to break. And he is going to do a hammer and anvil to kind of finish the deal. Both my units over here, unfortunately, are routing. But I do still have my bow warrior monk to continue to pick off some people. Over here, James is doing a beautiful charge into all this Matchlock Ashigaru. And that was probably one of the turning points of the match. This Matchlock Ashigaru blob could have done massive amounts of damage, but James got that beautiful cavalry charge straight into them, which was, quite frankly, fantastic. He's going to pull out now, and he's going to retreat back. Which is very clever of him. If he had stayed in that fight, he would have just been shot up by bows or matchlock, and we want to preserve all the units we can here. Over here, James is going to charge his bodyguard into this melee fight, which was a very good move, just because we had so many units that needed our support. So this definitely helped out. That charge lowered enemy morale sufficiently, and then he's going to charge in this Yari Eshigar to help fight as well. Now the problem being, we have some very weak units now at this point. You can see that I am now even chipping in with my bodyguard, because at this point, this is the only unit that I really have left. They're going after my Bow Warrior Monks, and there they just routed. So unfortunately, the only unit I have left right now is my bodyguard. Now I've popped a rally and an inspire, so that should help out quite a lot. Now, Yari Shigaru versus Katana Samurai is not exactly recommended, but the Katana Samurai is highly damaged, and my general is, although he's not that great in melee, he can hold his own. So there we route a Katana Samurai unit right there. Now, the only problem we're having right now is we have very little units remaining. James has cavalry, which is a real lifesaver in this situation. As you can see, all this cavalry has just ended up routing all these matchlock, all these bows. I mean, it's quite beautiful. Now, he needs to run these all down. And the huge problem with that is we don't really have too much time, because if they can reorganize, we're not going to be able to stop them. As you can see, they have a relatively full set of Yari Samurai and quite a lot of Naginata Samurai in this unit. Also, I mean, this Naginata Samurai is highly vetted. They're nothing to scoff at, and I don't know. It's a dangerous situation. It really is. So James needs to keep running down people with his general and his cavalry in order to make sure they do not come back, because if they come back, that could definitely be a deciding factor in the match, and it could cause us to lose. Alright, over here we decide to engage his Yari Samurai, since they are a little weaker than the rank 6 Naginata Samurai. And we're doing as much damage as we possibly can. Unfortunately, this Yari Eshigaru does rout, but James is going to get a beautiful hammer and anvil, which is going to cause this unit to practically rout as well. In fact, I do believe we're right about to make them rout, and there they go. Unfortunately, now my general is kind of surrounded, and he's down to 8 men only, so we are in kind of a tight situation. Alright, so at this point, my general is going to rout, and James's cavalry is going to need to get out of there because, of course, Naginata Samurai are spear infantry. Over here, you can see that this matchlock unit came back. James is going to charge it with his cavalry, but unfortunately for him, this matchlock was on defensive position or had the guard mode enabled, I believe is what you call it. But so they're going to get some shots with their muskets or matchlock or whatever. And they're going to wind up, they will rout, but at the same time, James's cavalry is also going to rout here. So both units are lost. That was a pretty interesting point in the match, because now we don't really know what's going to happen next. It is now a Naginata Samurai and a Bow Eshigar versus a general unit with 21 men remaining. Very dangerous. Now, the advantage here is that James's general does have a little bit of sword experience. My general did not, and he even fared pretty well. James's general is a journeyman swordsman and a famous leader, I do believe. So he does have some melee experience, but again, it's nothing too amazing. He has routed this Bow Eshigar at this point, so now it is a Naginata Samurai versus General James, Daimyo James. So at this point, I'm recommending that he take the Sword Dojo. For obvious reasons, this will increase the melee attack and charge of all units for him, and currently it is in the control of the enemy. So this, again, the key buildings played a huge part in this matchup. At the same time, though, Dragon Racer is not just sitting around. He has captured the Shrine, which will give him an increase in morale. Very, very clever as well. Over here, I still have control of this farmhouse, so Daimyo James will likely not get tired, and also the movement speed will increase. So hopefully he can get to his target quickly. That'll help him outflank and do whatever he can to cause damage. Alright, so as of right now, James is just capturing the Sword Dojo, so let's put this in fast forward, shall we? Nothing too spectacular going on right here. You can see the pink flag is going down, and up comes the black and red flag. It's pretty great. And it comes to the point where there's just going to be a huge charge straight at them. And that's what's going to happen. Alright. Let's take a close-up of Daimyo James, shall we? There he is, right there, ready to fight, proudly, honorably. Clearly this has been an extremely close match. Just look at all the bodies littered across the battlefield. It's quite amazing to me how long this battle also lasted. You know, typically Shogun 2 matches don't take this long. This was large funds, of course, which I do typically play even, but they usually don't take this long. Clearly, it came down to the wire. These key buildings are going to play a huge part in how this battle shapes up, and who knows how it will end, really. I mean, he has the morale advantage, James has the melee advantage. It really depends in this situation on whose morale or whose melee will prove to be better. So here we go. Daimyo James is now going to go ahead and go in on the charge. And now James goes in for the charge. And we'll see how this goes. Now, one thing that I'm not quite sure why Dragon Racer did was he did not charge, which drastically could have tipped the scale of this battle, but nonetheless, James is now engaged. This is an incredibly close fight. That charge bonus helped James a lot, but at the same time, he is very much so outnumbered. It's 60 Naginata Samurai versus 16 bodyguard units. I mean, it is very, very dangerous. Very dangerous indeed. There's also the fact that his general could die at any time, which is incredibly dangerous as well. You can see his general is kind of being outnumbered here. Now, at the same time, you can see that morale is really starting to hurt these Naginata Samurai. And also, James has popped a Inspire, and pretty soon I believe he'll pop a Rally. But nonetheless, there goes the enemy. I hope you all enjoyed this multiplayer battle replay. This was probably one of the funnest matches I played on Shogun 2 since I've had the game. So I hope you all enjoyed. That's it for this one, and I'll see you in the next video.